right. So as always, we invite you to be seated comfortably, making sure that there's no tension in the body. Very often, spirituality is considered to be separate from day-to-day life. So we say, I don't have time for spirituality, or I need to carve out time for spirituality. But in fact, the idea is to live spiritually, that they not be separated, but to live spiritually. And this begins with healing the relationship between the self and this body, the vehicle through which I act. I begin that process of healing by focusing first on just the self. Previously, I thought the self was the body. But in quiet moments like this, when I'm very honest and introverted, I can easily become aware there is a difference between me and this body. I can observe the body. I can observe the breath. I can observe the movement, the activity of the body. I can observe the heartbeat, the pulse. But the body cannot observe me. It's very clear that I and the body are separate. I need the body to express the self. But I don't need the body to exist. The body needs me. As long as I am in this body, it will continue to function. The lungs will keep breathing, the heart will keep beating. But if I was to leave this body, it would fall down, become non-living. I am the life in this body. Just as we might put a battery in a toy so it begins to move, I am the life force, the energy in this body. The body is physical, and I am not. I am non-physical or spiritual. There is me, the soul, and there is the body. The actions I perform through this body depend on the state of me, the soul. When I am aligned with my true nature, free of pain, very peaceful, the actions, which are thoughts, words, and deeds, they become peaceful. The body relies on me to drive the quality of action. The body is a remarkable vehicle of expression, but the wonder of every act is ultimately determined by me, the soul. Every second, every action through the body is driven by me, the soul. Om Shanti. So we can begin the interview, but really want to stress that your questions are very much encouraged and invited, because we want to make this meaningful and relevant for you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat box if you prefer, or even unmute yourself. Not a problem. Okay? So I will hand it over to the interviewer to begin.
Well, I was going to go and ask Pauline what inspired you to have this talk, but maybe we'll just start. Just in terms of this, so the request was for us to have a session on karma, and we have talked about this in the past, but that's a heavy-duty word for some. And so maybe just to ease those who are watching, if you don't know much about karma, if you haven't taken Raja Yoga, so this is through the lens of Raja Yoga. So about karma, and I really enjoyed the commentary as a nice, very general introduction. What do you feel is this, the intention of Raja Yoga is about the sense of identity of me. What is karma in terms of Raja Yoga? And with respect to some perhaps maybe heavy ideas we have about what karma means.
I think it's really important first to appreciate that the whole intention or objective of Raj Yoga is really to focus on peace and happiness. These are the two things that everybody wants, is peace and happiness. And the terms that are used in the study are liberation or mukti and liberation in life or jivan mukti. But these translate basically, I like to use those terms because I think they're going to tie into karma. So liberation, mukti is, or freedom, might be a word we relate to, is peace. And then freedom or liberation whilst in action in life is happiness. And this is really important because we've gotten to a place right now where we really think that peace and happiness are the result of something outside of us. So they are reactions. So if someone does something or I see something, it could make me peaceful or happy. So we've totally disconnected them from the concepts of mukti and jiva mukti. We really feel how I'm feeling is a result of what's going on outside, whether it's people or situations. And what Raj Yoga, and I think common sense is suggesting, is that that's actually not the case, that peace and happiness are a result of something happening inside. And specifically when it comes to happiness, so this idea of liberation, it's peace, this freedom, and we use the term purity often, to maintain that state as I come into action, that's what brings happiness, creates happiness. So karma, this idea of the state that I bring into action, is what's going to create happiness. Liberation or peace, again, which we suggest is the innate state of the soul. So I maintain the integrity of the self as I come into action, creates happiness. And I think putting all the terms aside, I think we all, if we're honest and reflect for a moment, can realize that I am happy when I am operating in a way that aligns with my core values. I think we all feel very good at the end of the day when we really had that integrity as we've gone through the day. And that's what spirituality looks at, is how to maintain the spiritual integrity, the purity of the self, as I come into action. What we notice is that we'll be seated in meditation, nice music, nice lighting, quiet room. We're totally blissed out. We're having such a peaceful experience. And then the moment that the light goes on and someone says something to me, I'm like, that beautiful, peaceful experience is gone. So the moment we come into action and interaction, we lose the connection with that experience. So the question always is, that beautiful connection I might have when in seated meditation, do I have the same quality of feeling as I act and interact? This is what's going to create happiness. So karma is a huge part of achieving every soul's objective, which is that happiness. I have to bring a certain quality into action to experience happiness.
This word karma, it is used in day-to-day life. It's even used in secular situations. Oh, I don't want to incur that bad karma. Mm-hmm. Do we have perhaps maybe a limited idea of what that means then?
Probably, as we come into the study, we notice that we extract words and kind of make up definitions that may not have anything to do with anything. Yoga is one of the classic ones. You say yoga and we might even think Lululemon, right? Or yoga and vegetarian food, or recycling, or strange things, right? Yoga simply means union. So really having to look at what's going on. Karma is the same idea. We tend to connect it to bad things. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's their karma, or karma will get them. Karma simply means action. It's a very neutral term. It just means action. There's a whole spectrum of gestures that are included in karma, from very, very subtle to very gross. So to even which consciousness I choose to embrace is a karma. So very, very subtle to very gross. That's what karma means. Then there's something which I think most people are referring to, called the law of karma. Again, very neutral. We usually show Newton's cradle for this to illustrate law of karma. But law of karma means that for every action, there is a consequence. Very neutral, very, very neutral. Though it gets interesting because of the makeup of the soul, that we're suggesting intrinsically good, intrinsically peaceful. That's our original state. So we're not too keen about consequences that make us feel peaceless or sad or painful. It goes against our innate makeup, so we're not very keen about that. So this is when karma sort of stops taking on that neutral feeling. It's still very, karma, it's like gravity. Gravity's not out to get anyone. It's just a law of the physical realm, that when you move something from that center of gravity, then there's going to be the force to bring it back to that center of gravity. So the same with law of karma, if you put an action out, there will be a consequence. When you mix that with the makeup of the soul, is that the further we stretch like an elastic from our innate state, the more stress that is putting to snap it back. So again, karma is I wouldn't even say neutral. I would say it's benevolent when you combine it with the makeup of the soul. Just like gravity is trying to bring the object back to its original state of rest, the spiritual law of karma is always trying to bring the soul back to its original state of peace and purity. If I'm performing actions that are in opposition to that, the consequences coming back will be experienced as difficult or painful because I've actually moved from that original state. Otherwise, it's completely neutral.
So when one is doing something that's against their original sense of self and they start to have a bad conscience,
Yeah, that's when it gets interesting.
because then they start feeling, like was something done bad to me. I didn't mean to try to do something bad.
So the karma, so as again the makeup of the self, we have something called the conscience. And again, this idea, the conscience is also, like the law of karma, is very sensitive to the original, the pure state of the soul. Otherwise, these are all neutral things that mean nothing. Good, bad. There is no good or bad if we didn't take into account the original state of the soul. Because the original state of the soul is a certain way, we now feel certain things are good or bad relative to that original state. So the conscience is very sensitive to the original state of the self, which is very pure, very elevated, very peaceful. So it weighs or bites our conscience when we move away from that original state in our activity. We start to, because we don't know what to do, we start to feel bad, we start to rationalize, we start to blame. There's all sorts of, this comes into dissonance theory, that because we can't reconcile our activity with our original state, who we really are, we start to come up with excuses. Rather than understanding, we rationalize, which only makes it worse. So spirituality really tries to get us to a point where we can understand what's going on, really understand why I'm operating against, in opposite to my original state, and what I can do, what personal responsibility, what I can do to start to realign with my original state. So this is really useful rather than this idea of just going further and further. What happens is if we get to a certain point of feeling bad, we can't tolerate that anymore. So we just start to project outwards. That person's the problem, that situation's the problem, because it's intolerable to look at the self anymore. It's a really beautiful concept, such an empowering concept to explore, really understanding karma and the law of karma. But it is going to involve that personal responsibility, but very well supported with a really rich understanding, so that there's no sense of shame or guilt or unworthiness. That's what really locks us down.
So is it possible then, because you were mentioning about the gestures of action, karma, can be subtle to very gross. And we're learning now that to make a mistake, would there perhaps maybe a deeper mistake that you feel bad that actually you did something, your conscience bites, but could there have been even a much more subtle mistake where you just feel bad because you made a mistake? So there's an even more subtler mistake within that.
Yeah, there's adding, as we say, adding oil to the fire. There's already a mistake made, and then the way I am addressing or managing the mistake is actually compounding it. But also to recognize the law of karma is very, very sensitive to the invisible, extremely sensitive to the invisible. And when we're really clear and honest with ourselves, we also are very sensitive to the invisible. It's very sensitive to the purity of our intentions. So we've got, without going too much into a whole bunch of expansion on this, we do reach a point in this wonderful journey through time where we really disconnect from ourselves and we just are living through an image, which some call ego. And so all of our actions are basically dedicated to maintaining the image, to maintaining the value we've invested in the image, to the attachments to the image. All of our actions are dedicated to that. So it's very difficult to have a pure intention when ego is driving the show. Everything we do is basically to get a return, to take. Now we can disguise it well. I can appear to be giving someone a compliment, but if I'm really honest, I want them to think I'm a nice person. I want to get something out of it. The law of karma is very sensitive because it's saying, wait a minute, you are undermining your original state, which is self-respect. What kind of friend am I to you, the law of karma is saying? What kind of friend am I to you if I facilitate that dysfunctional way of operating, if I let you undermine your self-respect? So this idea that the law of karma is actually our friend, it's always trying to put, nudge us back to our original state, which is self-respect, very elevated consciousness. We start moving further and further away from that. And we get away with it because we all are in the same boat. So we all play by these rules of ego. But what it's doing to our heart, to our conscience, to our wisdom, our inner wisdom, is quite a price. There was once, and I'll stop after this just for questions, but there was once a really, I'm sorry to bring this up because it has to do with movies and TV and things, but I was just thinking about it relative to this series called Once Upon a Time. And there's one character in this, it's based on a bunch of fairy tale characters. And one of the characters, I think he's Rumpelstiltskin. And I think things happened to him in his past such that he assumes this role in the series. But it looks like he's the bad guy. Like, he owns a pawn shop, very deep symbolism. He owns a pawn shop, so all the people's old stuff. He's got all the old stuff. He has this really strange control, but there's something else about that character that's really fascinating. But he looks like he's the bad guy because what happens is whenever anyone's really desperate for something to happen, they want something to happen, they're sure what they want to happen is a good thing to happen. So they want it to happen, they go to him and they say, because they know he has the power to do it, he's got connections, he can pull strings, they say, I need this to happen. I really, it's going to be tragic if this doesn't happen. And it looks really good what they're asking. And it's going to be tragic. Okay, are you sure? They're like, yeah. No, I really need it to happen. You know that there'll have to be a contract, a deal of some sort, right?
Which is why a pawn shop, right?
Yeah. And they say, no, whatever. It's fine. Yeah. Okay. So I'll do this for you now, but this is what I expect in return in the future. They're like, no, that sounds totally fine. That's no problem. And of course, when the return comes, it's not so fine. So that's why he's considered to be the bad guy. He's not. He's simply actually representing the law of karma. Is I'm going for a short-term hit, but there's a price. And that return will come because I just went against my own dignity, my own self-respect. I acted against it. That's a price. So it's a very fascinating topic, which is to me the essence of quality of life, learning how to act in alignment with my true nature, or we sometimes say dancing with the law of karma. But we'll stop and see if there's any questions or comments, and that includes Nora as well.
And there's also those who are on YouTube, so
we will explore it a bit more, Leah. We'll see if we can get through question and answer.
What is the price, Leah is asking. So those on YouTube as well, I know that you're probably joining in a little late, so you're also welcome to, if you have any questions, you're welcome to post it on there in the chat box. I think
Pauline's trying to. Go ahead, Pauline.
Can you explain further? Because is it clear? Can you hear me? There's a saying too that and so is your karma, and so is your destiny. And can you hear me? Sorry. Oh yeah. Okay. So if the consequences, has returned to you, and it's a bad one, so you have the power then to, to reverse that or to do the pure karma. And, you need a lot of power in order to understand, the situation. Sometimes before, you have that good response. And a lot of times we have that question, why, I didn't do anything, why something happened to me. And I'll also mention about the karmic accounts, from the previous, costumes. So I would love to have more uh, information about, the destiny and then the previous karmic accounts, to deal with it. And if something that you need to do, or just something to let it go or to let it be. So
So, I don't know if you want to address Leah's question through question and answer. Or...
Sure. Leah had asked a question, and it's actually connected to Pauline, what you had shared too. So Leah had mentioned here she doesn't get it. She'd like a bit more clarification. What is the price? As Judy was sharing there, when we perform certain decisions, basically, there we use that word consequence, but it's a heavy duty word too. It's basically there's a result. There's a result, and perhaps regarding Leah's question and even what Paulina is asking about, stepping back just a little bit, where does soul consciousness, the experience of being a soul, where does that sit in terms of trying to grapple what karma is?
Yeah, so the idea when we experience, really try to connect to that experience, I am a soul. And I know that Pauline even used the word costume in reference to the body, and different costumes suggesting we take rebirth. But if we look at the simple example of an actor, and I like that example because it's about performing action, so that's why they're called an actor. If we look at the example of an actor, we've got a person stepping into a costume, and there's a whole image and story connected to the costume. So Joe might put on the costume of Hamlet. And once he's in that costume on the stage, he acts like Hamlet. That's what we expect. We don't expect to see Joe. We expect on the stage, he's in the costume, he's playing that role of Hamlet. All the time that that's going on, Joe is aware. I'm not Hamlet. I'm just playing the part of Hamlet. He's very aware. So this is sort of soul consciousness, if you will. I don't forget myself under the influence of the costume. To move away from soul consciousness means Joe suffers a psychotic break or amnesia. And he's got the costume of Hamlet on, and he thinks he is Hamlet. And he's totally forgotten who Joe is. There is no Joe in his consciousness. He thinks he is Hamlet. He's trying to make sense of how he should act relative to what's going on the stage, because he's in a state of forgetfulness. He's been taken over, if you will, by the costume and the story of the costume. So you can imagine what's going to happen. Right? He's just reacting against whatever immediate information he's got. People are coming after him and trying to kill him, and he's just trying to do the best he can. He has no idea what's going on. So similarly, when we say soul consciousness, so he's totally disconnected from Joe. When we say soul consciousness, we basically have gone into a state of amnesia. We actually think we are the bodies, which we're referring to here as the costumes. We think we are these bodies, totally disconnected from I, the actor inside, which means I've lost access to the capacities of the self. First being peace. So this is where self-respect comes from. Now my sense of self, my sense of value is completely invested in the physical costume and everything connected to it. I'm going to succumb to something called illusion or attachment, and the list goes on and on. My actions will be driven by this. They won't be driven from self-respect or self-identity. They'll be driven by that investment in the image, the costume, which we call ego. So if all my actions are driven from there, it's going to kind of shape the results that come back. And we've been doing this for birth after birth. And although we don't carry the bodies with us, we do carry the account of actions with us. And they are encoded in our personality. That's how we carry it from birth to birth. So to overcome it, you can imagine, but this is the way, we say, this is the way I am. No, it's not. It's your karma, it's this personality, it's this record of a karmic account. It's not who you are. We say, oh, but I'm just this way. No, you're not. The moment you remember you are a soul, you connect to your true personality, your true capacities. So there are two things needed to change, to turn around this karmic account issue. Some knowledge, right? I need to know I'm a soul. I need to know stuff about that. I need to know how to, and yes, that's going to then allow me access to power. It takes power to override. It's like a salmon swimming upstream. It's going to take a lot of power to override what have now become deep habits within the self. Right? It's kind of ironic, to be my true self is going to take a lot of power. It's not become my default. Now this other image I've created over many births has become the default, and I'm acting through it. So in terms of what is the price consistently in a nutshell is separation from the true capacities of the self. I'm simply reinforcing this sort of, we say, acquired structure that we think is the self, but it's not. We call it body consciousness. I'm just reinforcing it with these actions and these bargains, if you will, that I'm making with other people and situations. It's all very incognito. We really can think, oh, but I'm just being a nice person. But I'm not being myself. I am actually reinforcing the image. I'm getting further and further from myself. And there's only so far you can stretch an elastic before it snaps. No, he's not being bad. No, he's not.
So
he's simply, sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you with that
repeat
example.
the question.
So the pawn shop guy asking for a return is being bad? No, he's not. What would happen is people would go, he's representing a certain concept, this kind of way that we're now, it's very interesting in the study of Raj Yoga. We talk about these different phases the soul goes through over time, and we suggest over rebirths. And for the very first period of time, this period of innocence or purity, we refer to as the most divine part of our journey. The next stage that we go into, we refer to as merchant. And this is when we start bargaining and making exchanges. And it's not in a very gross way, they're very subtle. Very, very subtle exchanges through intention, etc. So he's representing a concept, really the concept of what happens when we kind of disconnect from ourselves in our pure state. We start to make bargains, right? So people would go into the pawn shop and say, as an example, I think someone was trying to get back a long lost heirloom or something back, or hold on to the family property. So they go into the pawn shop and say, can you help me to keep the family property? It would be really beautiful if we can keep it within the family. And he say, yeah, no, I can arrange that. Again, he's representing a concept. This is how we go through our life. We're constantly making exchanges. He says, yeah, I can arrange that, but there will be a price. And it's not he's a bad guy. This is all he's saying is there is a result of actions. That's all he's suggesting. It's not a bad guy. It's just a basic principle of action.
But what that result is
but what the result isn't what they want. Exactly. And so we wonder, why am I so unhappy? Why did this horrible thing happen to me? They said, well, let's go back and look at the actions I performed. And then we say, oh, that just makes me feel bad. Am I a bad person? No, but I did disconnect from my true self, which left me only to perform these other kinds of actions, and is creating these results that make me unhappy. So it's just kind of highlighting that piece. That's all that I think he was representing in the story, was that piece. Does that make sense, Leah? Maybe it made it worse.
She might be typing
Or speaking.
or reflecting. Is her speaker on?
Yeah.
Leah, we know you unmuted yourself, but we weren't sure if you're trying to speak. But you're welcome to type in the chat box.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, we heard you earlier before we started recording, and now it is on. The speaker?
Yeah, sorry you can't. No, and I'm so sorry. I don't know why. It could be any number of things, Leah. It's a technical mystery sometimes how this all works.
Well, you're welcome to type anything in the chat
Yes,
box.
and okay, we will go on and perhaps some other ideas will come out as we explore. But it is a really, and I think the main thing is that it's not about making the self feel bad, but it is about becoming aware of the connection between the actions I perform and the happiness I experience. You're trying again, Leah, I can tell.
Sure, speaker.
It's on, yeah.
Pauline, can you hear Leah? Maybe it's just us.
You can hear, Leah.
I can't hear her.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. We'll continue.
Leah's probably gone out and come back in.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll continue.
So, oh, hello, Richard. You've joined us on YouTube.
Oh, Shanti.
So while Leah's coming back on, we just wanted to mention that at least I know that this aspect of soul consciousness, and I know Judy had mentioned that word self-respect, and the feeling of self-worth, I think it feels like a really big piece when it comes to being able to see things that aren't you and not actually succumb to feeling bad.
I really feel, to me, this is the speciality of a robust spiritual practice, is it can deal with this specific issue. The bottom line is that happiness is completely in one's own hands. Now, I've heard that many times, and it's sort of around, well, I'm just going to choose to be happy in this day. I'm just going to adopt the right attitude and be happy, which is great, but it's not quite getting to the seed of the problem, right? And so what we're, to me, the ultimate source of our peacelessness is actually this biting conscience inside more than anything else. As we say, the sort of weight of all of these actions that I've been performing through, if you believe in rebirth, many births that are sitting there like a perfect record inside. Now, externally, I appear to be completely functioning, absolutely fine. So we're completely, it's a bit like, the body can have some secret disease going on that, I seem to be functioning, and then one day I have a massive heart attack or something. But, it's incredible that this is all on such an incognito level, that there's a record of all the actions I have performed. Not, itemized, but just the result of it, that I have in essence been operating against my true nature. And even more interesting, I'm not even aware of what my true nature is. When we talk about, oh, that's human nature, to get angry, that's human nature. And yet we're not okay with it. Someone gets angry at you, countries get angry at each other, we're not okay with that. It's actually not human nature. So we aren't even aware of what our capacities are. We've really, really moved away. And internally, that's kind of recorded in the soul. And at some level, we're a little bit disappointed in ourselves, and we don't quite have the information to be able to address that in a productive way. And so a huge amount, if we're completely honest, a huge amount of many of our activities is criticizing others and the self. We're extremely critical of others and the self, right? It's this biting conscience, can't really tolerate that, so I'm going to start to bite things out there. We often use the phrase, this has turned into a world of thorns, where we're just, kind of pricking each other, this criticism, this very prickly characters. It really comes down to, I have to address this issue within the self of how can I, in a healthy way, understand the karmas or actions I've been performing, and be able to have a robust practice study that allows me to start to perform karmas more in alignment with my true self.
And that's subtle.
It's very, because it's
something
action.
showy
No. Ultimately, this is back to liberation in life. We want purity in action. That's how subtle it gets. Is purity in action. And so in the study of Raj Yoga, it's very methodical. Where it leads to is we actually want to plug into a constant source. It's like walking around with an IV. We want to plug into a constant source or flow of purity as we're performing actions. Because this is ultimate what the law of karma is interested in, is the purity of the action. And when we say purity, if you say that something is pure, it means nothing foreign is mixed in. What is foreign to the soul? Ego, attachment and fear and all of these things, desire, anger, jealousy, greed, all these things, and that sort of hatred. These are all foreign. If any of those traces are there, it is not purity. And then I'm going to act with these impurities. It's going to create certain results, and often they'll sort of surprise us, the results. We're like, but I did a good thing. But if there was a lot of attachment, which means expectations probably were there, desires were there, then it's going to kind of go sideways. So we're always quite concerned that it's the invisible bit of karma that's so important. Liberation in life, that purity in action. So I need to be connected to a source, a constant flow of purity.
So before I ask my next question, I just want to touch base again. I know, Leah, you left and joined again. I'm just seeing if perhaps you have more success if you were trying to share something. You're okay. Okay. And Pauline, did that help in terms of what Judy had shared? Okay. But you have a question, you're welcome.
Voice.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Pauline.
You mentioned about purity, the purity of intention. So what if the intention is pure, but the action doesn't seem right? For example, maybe I'm a mother, single mother. I cannot find a job, but I have a baby, that I need to feed. And I've done everything. So the last thing in order to feed him, to perform my role, is to steal. So, but I have the purity of being a mother, save the life of my, my baby. How are you going to respond in a soul conscious way, or so if you have the purity of intention but the action doesn't seem right?
Yeah, I know I've heard this example before. And I guess first off, and this is going to seem really extreme, so many might completely disagree with this idea, but the beginning of the story wasn't actually even pure, because I'm saying I'm a mother.
That's
So what we're suggesting is I need to be soul conscious. And I know that's sounds really extreme to suggest that. That's going to cause a complete reframing. I actually will function differently in soul consciousness. I know it's a really extreme thing to say. When you bring up mother and baby, it's like, oh, okay, that's the end of the line. It's going to hit the heart, and anything's going to be cruel. But it's, this is an organization that actually puts mothers in front, because the qualities of the mother are so critical to change, except for one: attachment. That's the killer.
But I can see where souls are like, whoa, what do you mean?
Yeah,
That means the baby, but we're not even going there yet. It's more like what's
What's the
driving
consciousness?
driving
really,
the choices.
really. And, the feeling too is that if one does have the consciousness and then goes ahead and steals, if you want, if they've really got, then things might work out in a very interesting way, right? What's set in motion. But the law of karma is extremely sensitive to purity. There's really no way around it. It's very sensitive to purity. So purity is everything, right? So that freedom from attachment, from ego, from fear, all of it. If the actions are pure, the outcomes will be a certain way. In fact, part of purity is you're not even outcome focused, right? You're only concerned about the income, if you will, the foundation, not even worried about, the next one we often get is so-and-so has a terminal disease in the hospital, and what are we going to do? And everyone will pray. And these are beautiful things. I'm not discounting it at all. But the one thing that's always missing is spirituality. I mean, we think we're doing spiritual things, but there's no spirituality. In the sense, there's no soul consciousness. So that means I have no access to the capacities of the soul. Just like the actor who had amnesia, he thinks he's Hamlet, he's doing wonderful things. Hamlet's going to learn how to meditate. The only thing he's not doing is remembering he's Joe. Now, if someone was watching that, they say, gosh, this is really weird. Like, all he needs to do is remember he's Joe. And then everything's going to be really different. He won't feel he won't be worried about this actor or that. He'll realize it's all a play. If he could just remember he's Joe.
Would you say then is my experience of being a soul such that I feel like I'm immortal? That this is where the challenge is that we're still trying to put ourselves in that headspace without actually being able
Going
to
into
be
the
in there.
headspace,
And
yeah.
so it's very threatening.
No, I mean, just to imagine, right now with special effects, what they can do in movies is insane, yeah? So imagine this crazy sci-fi thriller, they got people blowing up, and I always used to think, wow, what's it like for the actors? They got people being crushed and big insects and all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, what's it like for the actors? Oh, they're fine. Because they all know, right? It's just a play. No one's died. The role might have, right? That character might have in the play, but the actor's fine. Right? They know it's all props. They know it. They know what's going on. So they don't have to go to meditation or counseling or anything to change their feelings. They just have to remain in that knowing that it's a play. That's all they need to do. Whereas we might go and do meditation and everything, but we're not doing that one thing that would really shift. We're not coming out of amnesia. Right? I still am staying in that amnesic state, but I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm recycling, I'm meditating, I'm rallying, I'm protesting. I'm doing all these things that are supposed to change the world, but I'm not doing the one thing that would make that massive shift. I'm not remembering.
So what happens when it's just not a soul's time yet?
Then it's not their time.
It's like,
Yeah.
is
And that's
it okay then? Because it's just
there's nothing.
they're just trying to do what they need to do.
Yeah, there's nothing. You can't force someone to go into a paradigm shift until it's their time. You can't. right? So, in fact, the beauty of what's being suggested, because somebody say, well, what's the point of this whole exercise? The point is for the soul to experience everything that's possible to experience. That's the whole point of this exercise. And for me to go through that full spectrum of experiences requires I forget. Otherwise, this is what the story will look like. At the beginning, I have it all. In the middle, I have it all. At the end, I have it all. The end. What is the point of that story? I can't even appreciate that I have it all because there's no contrast. So to experience, for the full spectrum of experiences, there will have to be a mechanism, and that mechanism is forgetting.
I just want to clarify one thing when you shared that. I have had counter
Yeah.
statements say, no, but what's wrong with that? I'm like, but you're realizing that you're in a space where it's dark inside. And when you feel the contrast, that's the only time when you would actually appreciate it, because we were in this lovely meditative experience with some others, and they were saying, wouldn't this be lovely if this happened every single day? I'm like, I don't know if we would still appreciate it by the time it was the 69th day, the 108th day. That, not saying that, but I think that sometimes maybe we take for granted that when we have lost access to our original self, that's really the only time you can really appreciate that you're looking for it.
Yeah, I mean, the more interesting story, the ones that we like to go see, are where at the beginning the hero has it all, in the middle they lose it all, and the most exciting part, they get it all back. There needs to be a setup for that exciting part where they get it all back, which is the most beautiful experience for a soul. I will not be able to have the experience of attainment if I don't have the experience of loss. And I won't have the experience of loss if I didn't have it all to start with. So all three, the beginning, middle, and end of this story, are essential for the soul to fully experience everything, to fully experience the self. So it's a beautifully crafted story, and there's mechanisms in it. Forgetting means I start to lose stuff, right? I start to lose myself. So it's beautifully constructed. And yes, everyone has their own timing within it as to when they're ready to start to get things back. First, I have to lose everything. We compare it to the battery. It has to completely discharge before I recharge it. If I start to recharge it only halfway through, then half of the story is being missed here. So, we often have heard, we cried out to God for so many births. Cried out, or people will even be in a difficult situation, says, we cried out and God did not. If anyone's a master of timing, it's God. Because he works in conjunction, or he does not work against the law of karma. So the contrast is huge, and the timing is huge. It all has to happen within the context of the soul's story at the right time in their story. First, they have to experience everything. They have to lose everything before they're ready to get it all back.
Now, I know we started a little late, so I'm allowing myself to ask one more question. But actually, maybe that can wait for another time, because Pauline, I think that you unmuted yourself. So if you have a question, please go ahead.
Just realization that I know that before the study, we have that mentality about karma, which is negative, and it's a bad thing. But the knowledge is really very important, to give us direction and how to respond in every situation. So, at the foundation of being a soul.
Yeah.
With regards to my question earlier, when I say about I am a mother, it definitely reflects on my identity. And I've never really been aware of that. So,
Yeah, it's such, this is why we say it's spirituality in day-to-day life. But I'm really trying to experiment with, we say, a different way of operating, but perhaps it's more our innate way of operating. We're really trying to, and we see the exact same thing. All these principles we're talking about, we see it play out often as a metaphor in the physical body. So if nothing's gone sideways, healthy baby, healthy body, it has certain natural capacities, ridiculous flexibility, range of motion. It goes in the proper posture. It's all very natural. Sorry, Pauline, you were going to say something.
I mentioned about mother because yesterday I was at work and I was really working on the quality of love for the past few days, and I had a client and she was really stressed. She was late for 15 minutes and I started the treatment. And I kept telling myself that, I am loving, I'm unconditionally, understanding and acceptable. And within 5 minutes, that my client starting to cry. And she couldn't stop for 5 minutes. And I stayed neutral, and I think being soul conscious, I never been so reactive. I just stay neutral, and then all of a sudden she asked me, "Do you have kids?" So I say I don't have kids, but I understand. It feels like I got connected with her. The only thing that I respond to her because I don't want her to cry all day there, and I told her that I understand what you are going through. It's gonna be okay. And then, a few minutes, she was fine. So I a vibration, and even it's a subtle, intention with my pure intention. It came down, and she was fine after the treatment. But it was such a relief for her after, she was feeling comforted. So.
So what we hope to do always is to comfort the soul, not the role. So that's really always this is really, to me, is the essence of the role of God. Is He works with the soul, not the role. The role's coming and going. So, but really, what does the soul need to be able to turn its own way of operating around? So just to finish off with the physical body, again, this is just a metaphor, not to get caught up in the body at all, but with the physical body, notwithstanding if there's anything strange that's happened, but the body, when it's very young, it has certain natural capacities. It always fascinates me. I mean, you try putting your toe in your mouth, right? I mean, it's just these natural flexibility, etc. Yeah, Pauline's going to try. But anyways, there she goes. So these natural capacities, and then things happen over time, and we don't pay attention to maintain the alignment of the body. We start to experience something called pain in the body. Often, how we address it is on a very superficial level. Everything from medication to operations, not the alignment, and on it goes. And it's we're really forgetting the proper alignment of the body. And what it means is we're losing capacity. We're not operating at full capacity physically. So even something as simple as a cartwheel. I remember working with some adults, and we were doing handstands, and it was fascinating to me because there was so much fear. There was so much fear. And again, what happened is, this is one of the top things we hear with young adults, is they're a little closer. They can see that they're losing something. They're losing confidence. They can feel it. So spiritually, as we forget ourselves as spiritual beings, we're losing capacities. And so we can try to simulate those capacities in other ways, which we do, such as to be truly loving. We try to simulate. We start to make up ideas of what love is based on body consciousness. But if I became soul conscious, I would know exactly what true pure love is, how it's expressed, how it operates. It's all connected to soul consciousness or spirituality. So to live that way, an example of pure love is it's not conditional. So I have it equally for every being on the planet. No conditions. They don't need to know me. They don't need to like me. They don't need to be nice to me. It's got nothing to do with it. That's pure love. It's only possible with soul consciousness. It's actually very natural with soul consciousness. So operating through that soul consciousness, liberation in life is happiness. So this is the karma that we want to move towards.
So thank you, Judy. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Leah, as well, and those who've joined. But I wanted to mention that we do have our interviews with Raj Yogi on the Tuesday evenings, and we are actually coming to the point where we're talking about spirituality in day-to-day life. So we may actually touch upon some of these aspects because it does
It's a big topic.
It is. I mean, especially when it comes to what does it mean to be a detached observer? What does it mean to be spiritual in relationships? It's a big topic, I would say. So,
and I hope that this hasn't confused because, and I apologize if it has, because it is a big topic and there's sort of layers to it. So, but I appreciate the conversation. So we will end with reflection again. The idea with the Soul Cafe is every week, probably rotating between maybe 3 or 4 different formats. It either might be an inner fitness, an interview. I know storytelling is one that we want to look at. So definitely tune in. There'll be a surprise every time. So ending with the reflection. With one thought, I come inside. The rest of the world is tired of isolation, of being inside. But I actually enjoy coming inside, truly inside. Not physically, but bringing my attention, my awareness inside and becoming fully aware of the self. It requires that I turn inwards. The busyness, the doingness, the actions of day-to-day life can pull me away from the awareness of the self, from checking the health, the alignment, the consciousness of the self. Some say to think before you act, because there will be results or consequences. I like to remember before I act. Remember the self, that I am a soul, an eternal being, I do not die. My true innate state, my authentic state, is very pure, very free, very light, very fearless. And if I am patient, I can develop a connection to the source, to the one who really nurtures my authentic state. In a second, I remember all of that. And then I act. This is spirituality. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you to everyone joining with us on YouTube as well as on Zoom. Please let us know if you ever have any topics that you would like to cover. You're welcome to always type in the chat box. You're also welcome to email us as well. All right. So I just wanted to also remind souls that we will have an English Raja Yoga workshop at the end of the month, and so we just have to get the registration
Halloween.
details. So surprise on what the topic is related to Raja Yoga. And I think that's about it. You're welcome to visit the website for other upcoming online sessions, but that's, I think, the only one that's new. Self-care, which is usually on the Saturdays at 4 o'clock, are facilitated by the Raj Yoga Youth. They have completed their series, and so that will no longer be offered, but we will have the archived sessions available for souls. All right.
Thank you for joining.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Take care.